Let's talk about the types of variables that we encounter. So, to be very simplistic, there are three types of variables. We can think about quantitative variables, which are measured as numbers, qualitative variables, which are non numbers, and ordinal variables, which are this weird in between category where we can place things in order, but we don't have necessarily precise numbers that we can attach to them. This is going to become clearer with an example. So let's look at some New York City schools and try to talk about each column. Now, this first column is not really a traditional variable. This is just telling us the name of the school that we're looking at. So let's start at this second column, the school type. This is a qualitative variable. It's easiest to describe these different variables or different values that the variable takes on using words rather than numbers. Some of the schools are elementary schools, some of the schools are K through 8, and some of them are middle schools. So those are the three different values that we see for this variable: elementary, K through 8, and middle. And those different values are not easily represented as numbers. And we also can't place them in order from most to least, especially because K through 8 is a combined elementary and middle school. Overall score is clearly a quantitative variable. You can see that there's numbers all here, and they're reported to decimal places in many instances. Clearly, these are meaningful numbers. The next variable is overall grade, and this is a classic example of an ordinal variable. We can arrange things from least to most. Clearly, a D is a worse score than a C, which is worse than a B, which is worse than an A. So we can arrange things from least to most, or the worst score to the best score, but it's not necessarily obvious, more precise than that, what we should be doing. And so we think of this as being ordered, but not necessarily being precise in the way that a number might be. Finally, we have the English language learner, or ELL column, and again, this is clearly numeric. Now, one complicating factor is that often data gets stored using numbers, usually whole numbers, even if it's a qualitative variable. So for example, I could easily imagine myself downloading this data set and having a code book that tells me that elementary schools are coded as 1, middle schools are coded as 2, and K through 8 schools are coded as 3s. And so then in my spreadsheet, I would see 1s and 2s and 3s, and I might think that this is a quantitative variable. But those 1s and 2s and 3s are just arbitrary numbers that were assigned to these different qualitative values. And so it wouldn't really be a quantitative variable. It would just be stored in a quantitative format because the numbers assigned to the values would be arbitrary. We could have easily assigned different numbers. We could say that middle schools are 1s, that elementary schools are 2s, and that K through 8s are 3s, for example. All right, so here are a little bit more precise definitions of those three variable types. Again, we have qualitative variables, which it's important to note that sometimes we call these categorical or nominal. Different sources will use different terminology, but these three terms all mean the same thing when we're talking about variable types. It consists of categories or values that are not obviously ordered in any way. We can't easily arrange them from least to most. Quantitative variables have values that are meaningful numerical quantities, as we've already seen. And then, like we said, ordinal variables can be arranged from least to greatest. So that gives you a good overview of how we can think about categorizing variables. And part of the reason that this matters is that the ways that we describe and analyze variables are going to differ depending on which category the variables fall into. So categorization is an important first step to then later be able to do good description and analysis.